Oh, me prendieron el micrófono, me estaba riendo.
Good morning,
Bueno,
everyone. As you see, this year we have a slight change with regard to the people who come up here. We all want to come, research, development, people, and the purpose was to have more people in the audience, and also for logistic reasons, we thought that we wanted to speed up things a little. So throughout the years, people will certainly struggle for coming up here and telling you something, and I will give them the pleasure. But anyway, the whole research and development team has been changing from the point of view of its functioning, from a structural point of view, and we could say that the development team today has a lot of people that go beyond the small group that is dedicated to research, purely research. So we wanted to bring you these people here because from a philosophical point of view, there has been a change. So I'm Gaston Milano, and I am the manager of the GeneXus team. So my name is Gustavo Brown, and I'm also in the team, and I do other things. Nicolas Cardelino, and I work with web generators, Jose Lamas, GeneXus Server, GeneXus Cloud, and other things. Web generators, Eugenio Garcia, GeneXus for SAP, Portal, other things, Armando Paniza, Android Generator, and other things. Good morning, Marcos Espino, iOS Generator, Carmen Bachmann, products, and with Ursula, I work in delivery. You've lost your voice or you are sleepy? No, it's my manly voice. So, you know how this is going to work. But anyway, for those who haven't been here before, our idea is to chat, that you ask questions, make comments, suggestions, and we will try to answer them here on stage or later if we are not able to answer all the questions right now. Sometimes we end up discussing things outside in the halls with someone who may give you a reply. So who wants to break the ice with the first question? Good morning. Why isn't it possible to copy the abstract layout control? Why can't they be copied from one place to the next? Well, in fact, we have been working on this so that they can be copied. So the question is, again, why it's not possible to copy a control from an after layout to another one. So it should have been working. It may have been a mistake, but among two different development environments, they will be copied, and I don't know whether they are already in the version has been released, but the characteristic at least is implemented in the environment, in the trunk environment, and it's necessary to try it and just transfer it to the version. Are you going to use the GeneXus, the GeneXus technology for exportal? Well, we use this technology 100%. And in the new version that we presented in the event, we're also using other technologies for the front-end generation. 90% of the development of the portal is GeneXus. Oh, I know it's GeneXus, but in the talk about GeneXus, it sounded that there would be an environment that would be more reusable. Yes, with GeneXus portal in particular, I believe that many things can be integrated in order to initiate the applications. Today, we are closing a portal version that was renewed in many aspects of Suite. For example, GeneXus M is going along a different path, but it is web technology. Both are web technology, so there may be reusable components that we will indeed reuse and will be common to both. But anyway, we still have some strategic aspects to think about to see what we will do with Portal. But it is indeed one of the services that we want to integrate with GeneXus, but we haven't defined anything yet. Other questions? Good morning. Luis Alcocer is my name. I wanted to ask you about the user control, for example, in mobile sites, which looks like a function that should be there. Yes, there are user controls in the community that solve this matter. We have been working during these last months on this matter, and we have a release soon, which will be the printing in new text. And this is what we have been asked with regard to mobile. And then when we finish this, the following stage will be to be able to print a PDF, for example, which is a longer road, but we are trying to achieve both. Any more questions, doubts, comments? Good morning. Is there any possibility with regard to GXR to give a permit to a KB so that an external consultant does not have access to the whole information but to a certain module? And so we can have a project so that he works, but he won't have access to everything. Yes, there are different scenarios that are supported. One would be the allowance to inspect. He cannot touch anything, he cannot commit, but he can inspect something through the console, or you could even restrict the person, the permit to make a copy of the KB through a server without the possibility of a commit. There's another scenario that is more sophisticated when you work with an internal or an external team, which is mostly development, but you don't want this person to intervene directly in the version. That development version can be installed as a protected version, which requires a special allowance. So if you have a development team which is external and internal, and it's hybrid, you can give a general commit allowance or permit, but to correct the version, there's a special allowance or permit will be required.
É uma pequena observação.
A short comment. I'm going to try to speak Spanish. Last year, I discussed with you a problem we encountered, a functionality that is not functioning. When you have internal parameters, it is necessary to declare these parameters externally. And for example, it's not enough to put certain values inside or outside and declare them. And this I put as an example because they are not functioning anymore. There may be 3, 4 parameters, and it is necessary to remember that you have to declare them outside, and it's very troublesome. What if you put them in a visible place? Well, it doesn't function. You have to put them at the top. And I don't know whether this is important or not, but for the developers, it is very troublesome, and it would be good to be able to improve the process. I understood part of what you said, but I don't fully understand the case you are describing. So I would like to look at it more in depth. I didn't understand what you are doing completely. You're doing it with Waddle Plus, and then you don't have to do it with it? Well, I have to leave things visible. Really, I would like to discuss it with you afterwards to understand better what your issue is and see what can be improved. From what I understood, it's some kind of interference between what Waddle Plus does. No, it's where you put the filters and what you allow or not, because you don't have the visibility at the time of the design. No, it has to be outside. Does anybody want to say anything about this topic? Well, I think that we have to discuss it later for me to understand it better. Yes, and another thing in our daily development work is that when you've been working for many hours, a generator has to. The generator takes a long time. Yes, it could happen, and we have solved some things. It happens when there is a loss of memory, for example, and we have tried to improve speed. Sometimes we accumulate things and the memory is lost, and they start to work less quickly, but we have done several other things so that this does not happen in special optimizations or in the development of the working generators. We are always trying to avoid performance issues and improve the performance. Panisa, I don't know whether he is not happy with some of you because he's sitting on the other side. Well, he has a question now. Maybe you wanted to infiltrate a different team? Good morning. I'm from Brazil too. I think that this meeting is fantastic in order to meet each other. The web responsive generator, it would be interesting for it to have numerical fields, for example, or do they have? That would be interesting. And another question. There are certain things in GeneXus Terra that would be useful, for example, for the 15 version, like the dashboard. Yes, I will answer the second question. The dashboards are going to be ready in version 15. Maybe I said it in passing. Someone was saying no, 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 and I didn't know what they meant. Gustavo, everything's fine? Okay. Gustavo Martinez is the one who designed this object. But I heard him say no, 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 so I was wondering what happened.
Yes, we'll let you know. We are in a process where each feature that matures, what we call beta, will go through a test. Then we'll test, first we'll test the feature, then we'll test integration. If it passes both tests, we will release it. But the idea is to add the characteristics like containers, the net core generator. The most mature issues will be made available as soon as possible. We are not going to wait for a year and a half, unless it's not working otherwise. But if it works, at least in some cases, we will release it as soon as possible. And he was also asking about numeric fields. Yes, a property that in this field there's a keyboard for different cases. Yes, we'll include that. I don't want to promise this for the 7th upgrade, but it will come out shortly. It should have the mobile behavior and do this by default. Another question. Where... sorry, we couldn't get it. Again, Tero, he meant Tero. We have released a number of characteristics that are considered sufficient to say that this is a version, then we will add Tero. But you will see. In your case, you will see how GeneXus version evolves and is stable. It's like a trade-off we have to be very careful with. So I do not know when we will call it a version. In addition, GeneXus is going to provide service in modeling, in knowledge and generation. These things need to evolve on a daily basis. And the era of products, remember when you had to wait for long cycles. That's no longer possible. We need to respond on a daily basis. I cannot tell you that the numerical will appear next week in Tero. That's a promise that I don't know if I will be able to fulfill. It could be in 2 months' time, 3 or 4. The slots that we work with are every 2 months. Every 2 months there will be something new. If something is mature, we will include it in that slot. So I cannot talk about percentages now. Thank you. There's a question there at the back. I would like to know if you have thought about incorporating security in the KB, in the sense of not exposing all knowledge to all developers, but rather manage it through modules so that one developer does not look at other modules, just the one he has to develop. If that is the case, when will that be available? Well, the modules part is one of the strategies that could be useful in that sense, because you can make a module available by just putting the binaries that are generated without distributing the GeneXus code. Then, as part of the KB itself, we manage security of access and not other types. And that other part will be in the polarization of KBs. Then we have services, objects, APIs. This is what we have as work in progress. Well, around modules, what we are doing with modules is once the 15 version is released, when that was released, we still had small problems to deal with modules. There were many details around modules that needed to be defined. Then we started incorporating some new characteristics, and some users, like Almeida, gave us feedback saying that in the first stage we still needed some few things, for example, handling performance, being able to see the modules' relations clearer, and we are trying to complete that stage. We are trying to round up that stage. We have not yet moved into the second stage we planned. Today, as José was saying, if you have procedures or things that do not access tables, you can package them in a module. And then when you put it in another KB, you do not see its implementation. But the question is that sometimes you want to keep other things or comment other things. That would be a second stage, so that inside the module we can include other types of objects. The most important one would be transactions. Obviously, you will never be able to hide the interfaces of these objects. What you will be able to hide is the implementation. The module is something that we want to complete. We want to complete the first stage. So those of you who have used it will understand that this is useful for the organization of the KB. And then when several developers work together, they will be able to work in different performances. That is what we can do today, and we want to take another step forward to get to this functionality that you spoke about, to have any type of object inside the module. And at that point, we will be able to use it so that each developer works in his own module independently and open whatever is interesting to them. In GeneXus port, when you import a KB, there is a GeneXus core module, and you do not know the code behind it because these are functions or other things, and it's hidden, it's packaged, and this is a GeneXus knowledge base. Any other questions? Up here. Now that you mentioned the module, no presentation talks about the module base. Well, there was one, I think, by Enrique Almeida. He talked about his experience, and some people made comments that it was a good presentation. About modules, this is what GeneXus 15 already had. We only added stability, performance on top of modules, and we are currently working on characteristics based on what the users requested. In principle, this is what we are doing at this stage. We show more information about how to access objects, how to put more visible things, higher speed in the interface of the IDE experience, when you open modules, how they relate. There is a knowledge base that was very late in showing this relation, so we changed the speed, we changed the query to optimize this performance. So we worked basically on stabilizing and performance And I think this is working very well. And that would be like the basis on which to organize the KBs. Do you have any horizon as to when this can be done in parallel in different modules? No. Well, in terms of generation, we will work to have things done in parallel. In terms of compilation, not yet. But this will be the next step. Good morning. In terms of smart device offline applications, are you going to have tables? Are they going to be organized around the tables? Not in principle. The difficulty of organizing offline applications is that those who have the application installed do not need to go through all the different versions. So you might be able to jump from one version to a newer one. In addition, the premise behind this is that data always is to be found in the server. So by synchronizing, you could get all the data you need in the application. That is why we are working in the reorganization of these tables. Nicolas is asking me, what is your scenario? Why do you need it for? Can you explain? In an application for therapeutical work, we do not have this. Most information is offline, and the problem is that when there are changes in the table, there's no synchronization. It doesn't work because I'm trying to bring something from an outside field. We need to synchronize. And we would like to do that in the smart device. I don't quite get it. You change the structure of the tables in the server, and there's no synchronization. Is that your problem? Yes. Okay, if that is the problem, that's quite a problem. We need to talk with you and look into the details. This shouldn't be present as a problem. This shouldn't happen. I think you would have that problem if you change the tables in the device. If the tables are in the server, that wouldn't be a problem. That wouldn't change. Do you have tables in both? In the server and in the smart device? Now they are discussing without a microphone. I'm sorry, I cannot translate. We should look at it in particular. And then another problem I have is with time. It's very, very slow because I need to use images, and every time there's a change of version, the synchronism fails. Then in each new version, you should have a preloaded database, which is a copy of the synchronization you do before a new version is launched. You need to recharge or reload the version. And the first time it runs, it's going to be slow. Then it speeds up. You can include the new data in the APK, and the synchronization will provide changes. The synchronization is costly, so it would be wise for you to have it preloaded in the app. And this is explained in one of the pages, how to make an initial preloading of data. Good morning. I'm testing US3 of Amazon, and the question of binary data is a little bit more difficult. I have data in my own base, so how can I take this data like S3 in the same way I do with images? Is there a way I can do it? Who would like to answer that? There's a new type of data. Please confirm. Is it available? It's not in B15. It's in Tero. It's called block file. And basically, this is like multimedia, image, video, audio. It behaves like those data, but it can work with any type of binary. It will solve the same problem for S3, precisely. It's in the Tero version. Right. And it adds one more thing. What we have in U5 and U6 is an API called Storage API, and you can programmatically upload any action. It will be an automatic way of doing so. You can do it today by using Storage Up API. Storage API. That's what you can use. Another question is about main caching. How is main cache, memory cache behavior? Do I define a table, or will it organize my table structure through memory cache? I didn't get your question.
¿Cómo funciona Memcache si es que
Memcache es básicamente un diccionario que tenés.
Well, basically, it's a dictionary that has a password, and there is a structure associated to this key or this password. There is not a table mechanism. Well, Memcache, we are using it as a real database. It can be used for other things, but we are using it in the cache stage for one more supplier. There is no modeling of the database in order to say this table or this transaction is going to be stored in cache. GeneXus is used to catch certain things, for example, the sentences of the database. And as Claudia says, what it does is to have a value key, but the user does not need to model anything. I wanted to add something besides that. If you have configured the access to main cache, there's caching in all the tables, and in version 15 you have an API that does it automatically. Well, it's not tables. You can use it programmatically to set certain values if you want to access directly the cache provider you want, main cache or another one, but the rest is automatic. Yes, but a sentence is very widely used in the system. And can GeneXus identify it and put it in? Yes, in the GeneXus tables, what we have is that you can indicate the frequency of updating of the table. If you say that it's not going to be updated, GeneXus will keep it as it is without invalidating the cache. And depending on these values, GeneXus will make decisions about what to cache and when. What you also have now is a way of invalidating that did not exist before. Now it's simpler and easier. It's easier to invalidate. Good morning, I'm Leandro, and I would like to go back to the modules. We may have 14, 15,000 objects due to the impact. Are you envisage to release different modules. No, we don't intend to do it, but it's something that we would like to do as soon as possible. But as I said before, we want to be certain about step one and have users who are happy with that first step, and then we would continue. It is in our horizon, but firstly we have to have the first step right, because it's going to be costly too. And luckily, we have a larger knowledge base. We've done a lot of things with GeneXus, but there's also a problem of the scalability of the knowledge base, which has to be tackled because there are many clients that need it, but we don't have a date for that yet. With regard to programming oriented to objects, in transactions, is it possible to have that behavior? It's me again? Okay. Well, it's philosophical too. The what we have that is most similar to heritage is to use a system of subtypes. But your question is the orientation of the objects. This one is derived from this one. Okay. So actually, we have a vision that is not object-oriented and does not intend to be in principle, ever. I don't say that some things couldn't be taken, but the orientation to objects would lead us to other problems that are not solvable, that have other tools. So we based ourselves on the view of the data that the users need, because this varies much less than the relationship between objects. Like when you have object orientation. But anyway, what can be done, as I said here with the subtypes, is to model reality. So the question will be, which is a reality you want to model in order to give a response? It's clear that with GeneXus you can model any data reality that is requested. We have mechanisms such as subtypes, etc. And here my colleague is going to add a comment. There is one thing that we do have. You can have some kind of specialization through a dynamic transaction. It's a particular case of what you want. It may be useful in some cases, a dynamic transaction that is basically a specialization of another one, or a generalization. You can go either way. You could have clients on one side and active clients on the other side, and you could work with active clients as if they were included in the model. Yes, it is recommended to analyze what you want with the data in order to do the modeling afterwards. Good morning. My question was about this matter. Sometimes we want to have several methods and not need to create many objects. My question is there something similar for a procedure that has several methods inside, so that in the tree we can see afterwards referenced objects and which other methods that are used? For example, with the just we don't know, we lose a bit of it. And as a comment, the option to use more than a nucleus so that there is a parallel processing in evolution 3 and B15 and the CGR generator, they lose the reference of the objects it's going to generate. If you want to make a reference, it may say this object does not exist, but in Java this does not happen. In CGR it does. Well, we work in version 15 in order to improve the part of specification and generation in parallel. In evolution 3, maybe it's lagging behind a bit, and most improvements are being made in evolution 3. Maybe we have not completed everything, so we could discuss the case in particular with you with regard to the methods. It's something we've thought about, and we don't rule out having an evolution on how to write things in a more compact manner and not having an nprox. But we have to agree on some functions yet. Somehow, however, I think that it has to be improved. We have to improve on how we write codes separated in methods or however you call them, stopped or whatever. If we do this, one day we have to have the reference to which part we are doing, but we have to improve anyway. Yes, it was published for the web service, and I started using it, and I thought it was very useful to concentrate all of the functionalities. To make a controller of something, for example, is very difficult. Yes, it's clear that it was created because it was necessary, and we didn't focus on it too much to make it neater and easier to use in various ways. Well, provided you don't eliminate it. No, in any case, a conversion, but not more than that. Again, with electronic invoicing, it's necessary to have the invoice as a file and visualize it sometimes, and we need to duplicate the procedure. Would it be possible to have just one procedure and send it in execution time if I wanted, for example, only to see or only to file? And since I have the mic, I think that it would be necessary to have a section on to document good practices. There are many things around, and it's been very troublesome to find, with your help, of course, or the help of other people from the community. Some things we needed, and we have found things that were very useful, but that were not clear in the documentation, and mistakes were made. So if there were good practices recorded, it would be easier and more efficient to use the GAM application, especially when you go into production. And since this meeting takes place only once a year, oh, come on, during these 3 days, we are out there, and you can ask questions to all of us. Okay, let's answer these 2 questions. Well, you were talking about a printing that can go to screen or to file. There is an output variable that is standard, and the output can be directed to one side or the other. It can be received as a parameter in the report. This with regard to your first question. For the second one, after this event, for the people who come from abroad, we have a practical course, usually concerning the updating of versions. And this year we decided to focus on good practices. last year, we had a course on updating versions focusing on GeneXus 15, but now we've added many new forms that affect good programming practices. And those who have learned with the GeneXus 3 or 6 or 7 a certain way of developing today have seen that there have been many improvements of the GeneXus language, and there are better ways of doing things. So in this course, that's what we are doing, showing the best practices. And this is just one first step. Afterwards, we want to publish the material for everyone in the wiki or elsewhere so that everybody can see this material, and we continue working on good practices. Some of the things are ours, others we have seen in the community. There are some good practices guidelines. Yes, the community has written a lot in this regard about good practices or internal practices of some companies and have published them. So we are putting together this information, and we will have a course now, but then it will be something that we will continue doing.
I have to mention something about GeneXus M. You could evolve beyond that so that in future we can use GeneXus as a service, so that we change the business model and we pay for the use for what we generate. Well, that's a vision, clearly. You said it. We are moving in that direction. Even our delivery mechanism, our tools, our generators, the focus on performance, focus on zero friction of modeling, they all point to a world where GeneXus will become a service. And that may affect business models and provide more flexibility to different ways of selling from a technical point of view, which is our part, our responsibility. When we build tools, platforms, generators, we build them with that in mind. Platform, performance, quality, continuous delivery, so as to meet the requirements that are already there in the market. Thank you for your question. Hi. Regarding GAN, we are beginning to use GAN for smaller applications, but we have a problem. All the objects we put in the GAN menu are not in the tree. So when we do a deploy, those objects will not deploy. We need to create a pro to call them. Is there any way for the GAN menu to know which objects will be called to create the tree? All right, GAM makes dynamic calls, and that is part of the functionality associated to that. Those calls have to be dynamic and solved in the execution time. That's why what you said happens. In GeneXus, you don't have the references in design time. What we are doing in this regard is something being developed, and you will see that there's a new object called deployment unit. It will allow you to describe which objects will be deployed in a given unit of deployment, in a given component, or going to a virtual directory. If you want to deploy certain things, all those extra panels in the menu, then you drag this inside the deployment unit object. You drag the objects that you need, and then in deployment time, all the objects will be automatically included. In fact, you only drag the main, and this will take together all the calls trees, and if the objects you mentioned are not inside the calls tree, you include them separately. So with that, you can save it as an object in the deployment unit, and you will never again forget bringing them along in the next versions. But this should work with GX15. Yes, today you have to reference this. We have to reference this to some object, a dummy, or something that is not useful, so that the machine realizes that it's in the call tree. Otherwise, there's no other way in which we can do it. How do you declare what will be included in the tree? Well, this will come with a version that Arnie explained. This is all in the process of GeneXus 15. One day, GeneXus 15 will be called GeneXus 16, or who knows. Another question, now that I have the microphone. Today, in terms of procedures, you can put the rest and soup generations, but the data providers don't work like that. If I want to manage data provided with a SOP exit, you need an 6D, and you cannot put them together. Will that be solved in future? Yes, yes. Those things happened accidentally. We didn't plan it that way. And the same is true of other procedures. So that means just a simple conversion. We take this into account. That's a pending issue. We'll solve it. We have to complete this action. Thank you. I have two problems with SD. First with GAM. What happened to us was that we wanted to log in from the main program. We put a typification, and when we did push notifications for associated events, we noted that if the user was not logged into the application, the note would get there, the user would tap the notification, direct it, but then it went to the GAM login, and it didn't follow the notification procedure. We solved it by putting the notification in some specific cases, but that if you go into a web panel without a permit, you have to use different parameters. So I don't know if that is something that happens commonly. According to your problem, I think it's a bug. It's not something done on purpose. If I understood well, in your notification you say called a certain object and it doesn't go to the object. I think it's a bug, but we'll have to look into that. I think it's a bug. It's not a design default. It should behave as you expect after you log in. If it's not responding, it's probably a bug. The login is one step to your objective. I think you should contact with a support team to solve it. That needs to be fixed. Then another thing that maybe is related to all of this is that it has a peculiarity in the procedure that we use and in the transactions where we use the pattern K to B, or if we did an original and we specified the procedure. It happened that we got some difficulties with images of K to B. We had to duplicate some objects. Transactions had to be duplicated. And then that was the way we solved it. Or we removed the transaction number, and then we tried somehow to prevent the error. Didn't we improve that calculation, Fede? when we do mobile applications? Can you answer that? At this point, what we do is use the cross-reference information, and we do not discriminate whether the transaction is being used as a business component. But we have proposals to improve this procedure. They need to be incorporated. We have had some difficulties at the level of customers, and they have provided proposals to solve this issue. Well, we are getting close to the end, so thank you for coming today. Diego, I think is Diego Scafo, will talk about chatbot, but we will be available for the rest of the day if you want to contact us if you have any other questions. Thank you.